And there's so much things to talk about in regards to discernment. But first and foremost, the whole topic's on discerning the will of God. So what is primary and what is important for us to realize is that discernment must happen within our desire to love God. Right? That is the first prerequisite or a requirement. We must be open to God's will, and we must have the desire to do God's will. We can't discern not unless we have this orient or this direction. Right? It's different than choosing what we want for ourselves. Discernment is what we're choosing in terms of what God wants for us. And so how are you open to God's will? Right? How do you discern God's voice within your hearts, within your mind, and within your souls? So these are the three faculties to which St. Ignatius of Loyola focuses on when he talks about discernment of the Spirit. Because he recognized that discernment isn't just my mind or what I want to do, what I think is best for me, but rather where's your passion, where's your desire, right? Where's your wants? And your soul. Is your soul in a state of grace? Right? Because you really can't discern God's voice or his desire if you don't have that loving, abiding relationship with God. And so many people would ask me, Father, how do I discern God's will? And my first question is, are you living a holy life? Right? Are you living a life without sin? I'm not saying a perfect life, but I'm saying, are you striving to be holy? Right? Are you striving to fix the sins or the addictions within your life? Because many times we recognize that our desires and passions and what we want are disordered. Right? And when I say disordered, it's not an illness. What it means is it's not ordered to God. Disordered, right? It's not ordered to Christ. And so how do you order your passion, your desires, and your thoughts to the Lord? And first and foremost is prayer. Right? Do you pray often? And do you understand what prayer is? And so prayer is recognizing that our hearts and our souls, remember the three faculties, the mind, the heart, and the soul, is ascended to God. Right? It's not just enough to think about God. But when you're thinking about God, do you have that passion and love for the Lord? For example, when you think about your favorite verse or your favorite gospel passage, or maybe a passage from Psalms, or whatever in the Old Testament, do you have a favorite story that you meditate upon? What is your favorite story in the gospel? Can anybody share with me their favorite story? What is your favorite story in the gospel?
The parable of the lost son.
The parable of the prodigal son.
Yeah.
Right? The parable, yes, that's a beautiful story. Right? The story of redemption, right? The story of mercy, right? The story of a good father. And so we see that there's different themes that can play within that parable. And so how do you enter into that parable, but also live it out? Right? How do you experience that mercy from God? Right? How do you see that parable effectively playing out within your daily life? And so we see the transition from just our mind into a integration of also your soul and your feelings. And so discernment is very important because first and foremost, it is the question of how do you discern what it means to be human? Right? We have to touch upon our humanity first before we touch upon the spiritual life. Because you can start discerning about the good spirits or the bad spirits, as St. Ignatius called it. And the bad spirits are also maybe demonic attacks and things like that. But more common, what St. Ignatius of Loyola was talking about when he talks about bad spirit are all the things that are contrary to God that is affecting your holiness, right? Your human nature, right? And it could be distractions. It could be negative thoughts. It could be distortion within your mind and how you think of yourself and others, right? So these can be what we call bad spirits. And the good spirits are the one that continues to direct our hearts, our minds, and our soul to the Lord, right? There's a goodness in that direction. And so when you talk about God, and you talk about maybe the voice of the bad spirit, what are some adjectives that you would associate with God's voice?
Grounding.
Grounded. Okay, good.
Calm.
Calm. What else?
Peaceful.
Peaceful.
Silence.
Silent. Silence. Very good. Any other adjectives?
Decipher.
What was that?
I like decipher, like you can decipher, like you know it's him.
Deciphering it
Maybe discern.
is easily known.
Yeah, easily
Right?
recognizable. I
Easily
guess.
recognizable, yeah.
Timing.
Timing, right? Prompt timing, right?
Right timing.
Prudent timing. Comfort. Loving, what did you say? Right? So all of these.
Oh, I was going to say, I guess, like truthful.
Truthful. What are some adjectives that you associate with the bad spirit?
Divisive.
Divisive,
Negative.
Negative.
Maybe not. You might not be at ease. Like it's not
Maybe chaotic.
like chaotic
Or restlessness.
Confusing.
Confusing, yeah.
Detracting.
Detracting. Very good.
Smart.
Could be like,
Cunning.
maybe like negatively cunning, right? Maybe like selfishly cunning. Because even Jesus Christ says, right, be cunning as the viper, but as gentle as a lamb. Right? What it means is that use the wisdom of God, not for yourself, right, but in order to bring goodness to people, right, and to others, but with much gentleness. Right? But in terms of a negative sense, cunning can have also more of a selfish, right, taking advantage of another person, perhaps, and knowing that you have the ability and gifts that God gave you with your mind, your intellect, and your perception of life to use that against the goodness or the dignity of the human person. So it can have that sense of negative cunning to it. And so when you list all these adjectives of the bad spirits, and then all the adjectives of the good spirits, you already know how to discern God's voice. Right? But where's the tendency for you to lean towards? What are some of the ideas that you have that attachment to? Many times it's the doubts, right? It's the fears. It's the divisiveness, right? It's the sense of darkness, perhaps, the negativity. But then God grounds you, and God says, I love you. Right? God says, you can't do this. Right? God says, keep on working hard, do your best. But we have a tendency to fall into the trap of listening to the bad spirit. And the reason why is because now we go back to how God created human beings. So when we discern the voices of God and the voices of the world, or the voice of Satan, the bad spirit, we recognize that there is a desire for each one of us to love, right? To be loved, to be consoled, to be affirmed, right? To experience joy. And so these are what we call attachment needs. When God created Adam and Eve, they were created with all their passions, desires that we still have today, and their wants, but they were all directed and ordered perfectly towards God. And so God fulfills all of these, what we call attachment needs. So when God created human beings, we felt loved, we felt comforted, we felt affirmed, we felt joy constantly. There was never a breakage in that relationship with God. But since sin entered into the world, pride, selfish, egotism, what happens is that those attachment needs wasn't directed to God anymore. God couldn't fulfill that anymore because we felt like, oh, I wanted to be God. I want to fulfill these attachment needs myself, right? And we pointed that direction not towards God anymore, but towards ourselves. And so nowadays, the voices that we listen to, or the voices that distract us from listening to what God is wanting to say to us. Because what happens when, for example, somebody doesn't affirm you, right? What happens when you give a present to somebody and then they threw it away? How would you feel?
Discouraged.
Discouraged. Will you feel sad?
Yeah.
Will you feel hurt? Will you feel angry? Frustrated? Because you're prideful. I often was challenged by this when I was younger because I said to myself, why is it so painful when somebody doesn't love me the way I want them to love me? But do you hear selfishness in that? Right? Because I'm expecting them to receive my gift or to receive what I gave to them in the way that I was expecting it. But perhaps that person, maybe because of their own sinfulness, their own weakness, their own self-absorbed lifestyle or personality, couldn't see that. And so the gift I gave them, they didn't care. But are we in control of that? Right? No, we're not. So how I discovered and discerned what was happening here wasn't to blame this person, because I was blaming this person. I say, this is their fault. Right? They are my enemy. Right? And how I thought about this process allowed me not to love them, but to be angry at them, to be frustrated. Right? And so what really fixed me was when the moment I said to myself, I would rather sleep with a hurt pride than a guilty conscience. Think about it. Right? Your pride is hurt. Somebody threw your gift away. Wah, 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 we're crying. Right? I'm just going to cry. And I'm telling you, I'm going to cry. Because my pride has been built up so much that when somebody does something wrong to me, I'm going to cry. Right? Because my pride is hurt. But in that moment, what we have to discern is, what is God inviting me to do? Right? It's to come to Him, to realize that that attachment need of wanting to be loved, wanting to be affirmed, wanting to be liked, was placed on that person and not on God, where that original desire comes from. Right? And so why would we give another person the power to direct our life, or to influence the way we feel, or to change the way we think or perceive life? That's what we're doing. Right? When we're angry at somebody because they did something wrong to us, when we're angry at somebody because they didn't love us the way we want them to love us. I was angry for my mom for many years. There was 3 years of my life I didn't talk to her for 3 years. And I grew up realizing that, man, it wasn't my mom. It was me. It was me wanting my mom to love me in the way that I wanted her to love me. I wanted my mom to say, oh, it'll be okay, go out with your friends. You know, don't worry about it. When she didn't allow me to go with my friends. It was me getting angry because my mom didn't allow me to go to the prom. Right? Because I was like, I wanted to go with my friends. I don't want to stay home and help out my mom, help out my dad, help out my family. But you see, that selfish desire, right, was what didn't allow me to really discern what God was inviting me to do in that moment. And that discernment part is, okay, God, what do you want me to do in terms of love? Right? How can I do your will and not my will? Because my will is, I just want to have fun. But my mom's will was, I wanted to protect you. And the way that she protected me was through that various means and those various responses. And so the reason I'm telling you this is because discernment takes also knowing who we are as a human person. Are we selfish? Right? At times. I won't say all the times, but at times. Right? Do we have a tendency to be angry? Do you know anger is a secondary emotion? Meaning there's primary, you're not an angry person innately or inherently, you're not. What you are is a sad person that may have been misunderstood. And because of that, you fester that emotion of sadness and pain, and that transforms into anger. Right? Or maybe somebody lied to you and hurt you. And because of that, you thought about that lie and that hurt and that pain, and that transformed into anger. And so how do we get to the root problem of what your mind is thinking about? Right? Because emotion arises from how you think about a particular situation, or a particular comment, or a particular image. For example, when I was in high school, I had a crush on this girl. And I saw her at Montclair Mall in Pomona. And so after school, I saw her and I waved to her from a distance. She didn't wave back. So in that moment, I thought to myself, is something wrong with her? Right? Maybe something's wrong with her family. maybe she doesn't like me, right? Maybe she's ignoring me. So how I thought about that situation over and over, because I have this tendency within my mind to overthink, right? And I overthink to the point of already coming to a conclusion, which may or may not be true. A week later, right, I stopped talking to her for a week at school because I was mad. I was angry, frustrated. Also hurt. My pride was hurt, right? Because I thought it was all bad. Right? And then a week later, she came. We used to volunteer together at Pomona Valley Hospital, and she said, "Why have you been so cold to me? Why haven't you talked to me?" Right? And I told her the situation, and she goes, "I didn't even see you there." So I said to myself, I wasted a week of hell within my own mind, within my own heart, of anger and frustration, because I had assumed that that's what she was thinking. Right? So in that process of discernment, what is God's will for me in that moment? God was saying, just to love. Do not focus on evaluating your life as success or failure, whether or not a person responds to you in a particular way or not respond to you. Because if that happens, we're going to live our life filled with anxiety, my brothers and sisters. Right? And there'll be times when our mom doesn't affirm us or our dad doesn't affirm us, and we're going to go home hurt. Right? Because we wanted them to. Right? We wanted them to see our pain. We wanted them to see what's going on within ourselves. But at the end of the day, they really can't. They really can't, because they can't see what's happening within our emotions, within our mind. And remember, only God can fulfill all of those attachment needs that we have. And that is why when you discern, open up Scripture, right? Evaluate how God is calling you to love or be patient or be kind, be charitable. And focus on fulfilling your day as, did I love? If you loved, you'll sleep well. You may cry before you sleep because your pride is hurt, but you will sleep very well. I guarantee that. But if you have not loved, and you have hurt somebody, or you're guilty of a sin against your neighbor or God, what happens? You can't sleep well. There's a guilty conscience, right? There's something you're ashamed of. And I've often said, the reason why sometimes when we look at each other's eyes and we feel anxious is because deep down a part of us, there's a secret part that we're ashamed of. And we feel like if we looked at each other too long, you may know this secret part of me. And sometimes I tell the people who I am doing spiritual direction for to let that secret go. Right? Meaning to work at it. So stop committing that sin. Because if you're able to work at it, you'll see. You'll walk out there not worried about whether this person loves you or see you in this particular manner or not. You'll walk out there knowing that God loves me. God affirms me. God consoles me, right? God gives me joy. God loves me in this present moment. I'm blessed. If I die today, thanks be to God. Right? But we have given that power of love and affirmation and consolation and joy to people and things. For example, I used to place some of my consolation on my Bose speaker. I used to have these nice Bose speakers that I really love. I love stereo system and music. And one day, it was gone. I was in my college dorm, and I was like, where's my Bose speaker? Right? And it was torn. But in that feeling of being torn, I realized that, yeah, I have placed a bit of my emotions on this speaker, which is not even a human person. It's a thing, right? Right? And then I said to myself, I gotta let it go. I gotta detach. And many more other examples. One day, this guy, he wore one of my shirts I just recently bought from Banana Republic, or the week before. It was a nice shirt, it's like $60, right? It was really expensive, right? And then he wore it to Mass. And I said to myself, what? Isn't that my shirt that I washed the other day? And I said to myself, let it go, right? Let it go. Because there was a certain sense of attachment. And the more you're able to discern, like, is this what God is calling me to do? Is this His desire for me to detach? Is He allowing me to see, like, I have too much attachment towards material needs and material wants? God will move us in these directions. He will put challenging people in your life. Not to curse you. Sometimes we think, oh my gosh, why are you cursing me with this person, right? Why are you challenging me with this person? God is not doing that. God is a very loving God. So He's allowing that to happen in order for you to be sanctified, because perhaps you're prideful. Perhaps you're comfortable with what you desire in another person as a friend or as a neighbor. Or perhaps that person's in need of your love. And so my encouragement is, do not limit God's grace in any occasion or situation or any person. But try to see God's goodness in all things and all people. And so that is, one of the prerequisites is that openness to God's will. Sometimes God's will isn't what we like or desire. Right? But discernment is not, for example, discerning what is good and what is bad. You already know what to choose, right? If you're going to save somebody's life or you're going to kill somebody's life, what are you going to say? What are you going to do? You're going to save them, right? You're going to save them. So you don't need to discern good and bad. What we're talking about discernment, the will of God, is between two goods or three goods, right? Just like the vocation of single life, married life, or priesthood. There's three goods. What is God calling us to choose or to respond to? Right? And that takes a lot of prayer, but also a way for us to do that is to list the advantages and disadvantages. Right? So what are some of the advantages of choosing this vocation or choosing this job or choosing this relationship? And what are some of the disadvantages? Right? Maybe they're difficult. Maybe they're an alcoholic. Who knows? Maybe they've lived a life of sin and they haven't been back to the church. Right? So maybe those are some of the disadvantages. Maybe, or what's some of the advantages there, right? Maybe they have a kindness that you've seen displayed when you're with them. Right? And so St. Ignatius would say, list the advantages and disadvantages, then go to a person who has experience in that situation of dating, or relationship, right, or marriage, or priesthood, and talk to that person. Right? It could be a good friend, a good confidant. Maybe somebody who has many years of relational issues that they overcame, right? And you talk to them, say, hey, I got a situation here. Should I date this person? Right? Or you talk to a priest, says, Father, I've been dating this person. I'm not sure whether or not God wants me to stay with this person. And then you talk to the priest and say, these are some of her qualities, and these are some of my qualities. And then the priest go, maybe it's not her, maybe it's you. And that may happen too. But that's a part of discernment, right? And each person in particular have different passions, right? They have different desires, different experience and background. So it's not an easy one answer in terms of discernment, right? The struggle lies in the fact that what do you believe God is wanting for you in terms of your love for Him, right? Because you may say to yourself, I want to marry this person because I believe that this person will lead me to God closer, will perfect me. But nowadays, as we know, a lot of times go, I want to marry this person because I like this person. I love this person. And then when I ask them, why do you love this person? Right? Sometimes the answer is because they do things for me. Because they fit all of these qualities. They have a nice job, right? They already have a house, a car, right? Their family's great, right? My mom says to marry them, right? No one can discern the will of God for you. Right? Neither your mom or dad, or your siblings, or your friend. No one can say to you, I think God wants you to do this. Impossible. Only you can discern God's will for yourself. You cannot discern God's will for anybody else. Because that's a communication with you and God. And only you and God knows. I can't know that for you. I can direct you. I can counsel you. I can kind of see where God is trying to move you. But at the end of the day, that's where you make your decision to say, maybe perhaps God is calling me to this direction. And there's going to be a risk, right? A leap of faith. There's going to be a moment where you can have two good jobs. And you're going to say, both of them has advantages, both of them have disadvantages. What is God calling me to do? And I would say, just pick one. Who knows? Right? Who really knows? But any choice you make, if you make it with the context of loving God, will always be the right choice. Because even in a situation where you are experiencing difficulties in that workplace or in that school or in that environment, remember, God can also transform that difficult situation for His glory. Right? For example, sometimes we don't intend, like married couples, sometimes they don't intend to enter marriage and saying, I'm going to be divorced in 30 years. No, nobody intends that. But if that does happen, right, because for whatever reason, right, maybe there's struggle within their relationship, maybe they discover that the husband was an alcoholic prior to the marriage, maybe there's some mental illness that happened, maybe there's some infidelity that occurred, who really knows, right? What I'm saying is that God was able to bless that time, even in the midst of your struggle, right? In whatever way that you discover that for yourself. But it takes time to really evaluate that and to discern what God was wanting us to discover, not only about the family or that person, but about ourselves, right? Maybe there's a part of ourselves that perhaps, we didn't reveal to God and to our spouse. Maybe there was a struggle that we had amongst our spouse that we didn't realize that we had. Right? So there's things for us to experience in the midst of that discernment as well. And so how do you discern God's voice? And how do you know this is what God is wanting you to do? God will bring you all the adjectives you use: peace, calmness, right? A sense of control, a sense of clarity in light of our love for the Lord, right? A sense of even peacefulness that is always pervading, comfort, right? Consolation. And there will be moments of desolation too, because as St. Ignatius says, sometimes God takes away our feelings is because we rely too much on that love of feelings, right? If we don't feel good, we're like, maybe this isn't the call, right? Well, if that happens in marriage, what happens? Then you're basing your marriage on too much of your feelings, right? It needs to be the three faculties: the intellect, the emotions, and your soul, right? Sometimes you don't feel good, but that doesn't mean that God isn't calling you to pray, right? Some days I wake up and say, Lord, do I have to go to Mass? Right? And I'm saying that as a priest, right? Because my human nature is weak. I recognize my weakness. But then I do it because why? I love God. And the love of God is that very center that in the focus of discernment we're called to focus on. Right? Just like if you don't want to forgive somebody, why do you forgive them? Not because you feel like it. It's because you love God. Right? And the desire to love God makes us forgiving and merciful. Right? Also humble. Because how many times do we recognize our own difficulties and our own sinfulness, and then we say, I'm sorry for hurting you? Very little, right? I think it's easier for us to say, I forgive you, than I'm sorry. Right? To recognize that I am the one who caused you pain. I am the one who betrayed our friendship. I'm the one that hurt you, mom and dad. But sometimes when we say, I forgive you, we have this superiority, right? That pride comes and says, I'm more perfect than you. I forgive you. Right? And you have to recognize that. It's not to say that you are prideful. It's to say that there is a piece of your pride coming in. That's the reality, right? We need to acknowledge what is happening within ourselves and not hide from it. Because the moment we hide from it, what happens is that we start to, within ourselves, kind of fester the sense of spiritual pride, or the pride of being perfect, or the pride of not being the one who is guilty of any sins, right? But we recognize that we're all guilty to some degree, some form of sins. So how do you discern God's love for you, right? And that's really the focus of today's talk. So how do you discern what God wants for you to do in particular in this time and in your vocation? Right? So what are some of the questions in terms of maybe the challenges you've experienced in terms of discernment? Right? Have you ever had challenges in parts of your discerning process? Or maybe questions that you want to present to me that I can speak upon?
I have a question.
Sure.
How do I know when I'm humble?
How do you know when you're humble? Humility is a practice where we're able to realize our weaknesses and rely on God solely for His strengths, right? So our humility is recognizing, for example, Lord, I know that this is coming from you, my gifts, my talents, my strengths. But I also notice that in the midst of my daily life, I'm weak and I need you, right? So there is a humility in the sense of knowing ourselves in the eyes of God, right? And being humble, saying like, yeah, I'm sorry I hurt you, right? And I love you because I know that God is wanting me to love you, right? So you recognize your weakness. Or saying to yourself, man, I'm good at art. Thank you, God, right? Because now I can give this gift to build the kingdom of God. So that's also humility. That's not pride, right? Some people have the sense of like false humility, right? Say, oh my gosh, I'm not good at anything, right? I'm not worthy of your love, God. I'm not worthy of anybody's love. No, that's what you call degrading yourself, right? Right? And that's false humility. Why? Because we really never understood our human self, our human identity, as how God created you in particular. And to embrace like your goodness, to embrace your qualities, to embrace your looks, to embrace. It's not to say like you look in the mirror, like, oh, man, I look handsome, I look beautiful, right? Which is okay. I'm not saying that's bad, right? But the reason what the bad part is if you only focus your looks and you do not see it as a reflection of God's love, right? Rather, you just like, man, I'm the bomb, and it's all about me, right? But when I look at myself in the mirror, I'm like, man, God, you're beautiful, right? So how do you sanctify even yourself? Sometimes we objectify ourselves. It's kind of weird to say that, right? Sometimes we look at ourselves and we're like, man, I'm going to enhance my looks in order to impress somebody, right? Enhance your looks, right? How do you become more than the image of God, right? And it's not to say like makeup is bad. It's like, no. Right? There's a context to which we see that, yeah, maybe God's inviting me to have a sense of beauty, right, through the means of making myself appear also elegant, right, a way that does not detract from God's beauty or His image, but that invites people to see, yeah, there's a beauty in you. And when people see you, they see God, right? And so how do we sanctify ourselves as well in part of that discernment process, right? And do we see ourselves too often? Meaning, do we look at I knew a friend, every single mirror he passed by, he'll look at it. Every single mirror, every single time, right? He'll probably look at that screen right there with the reflection. And I said, man, you're prideful, dude. You're prideful, man. And sometimes that's what happens, right? I think sometimes we focus too much on the part of ourselves that perhaps God is saying, that's not the part that I want you to focus on. Right? Focus on the depth, the weight of God's love. It's just when you're speaking, right? Sometimes we say things because we know that person want to hear what they want to hear from what we say. Right? We're already thinking 10 steps ahead as we're talking with this person or they're talking to us. We're already thinking, oh, how should I respond to this person? Right? Because why? We like perfectionism. We like control. We like a sense of, I want the right answer so that you can like me. But remember, it focuses on me. And so what we have to do is we have to change the way we also listen. And how do we do that? By not thinking what to say, but by actually putting love of God in that moment to listen. And whatever happens after that, happens. Right? You could be mumbling something, you'd be like, my gosh, that was the most stupidest comment I've ever made, right? That happened to me. I stuttered one time, and I was like, oh my gosh, I went home, beat myself up, right? Because I said, why did I stutter? Why did I sound so funny? Right? Why couldn't I talk to this person in coherent ways, right? Coherent ideas. Right? It was because I was too overly worried about my image. Right? And that image caused me what? Anxiety. And the anxiety prevented me from saying things that I wanted to say. But the more I was able to make those mistakes, the more I was able to say, who cares? Right? If they laugh at me, the only thing that will hurt is my pride. Right? So I go home, I cry, next day I'm fine. Right? I'm telling you, I did a lot of tears, man. I did a lot of tears. Because I had too much self-love. Right? And that is part of our discernment. We need to discern how much do we hold ourselves in high honor. Right? How much do we love ourselves apart from God? Right? And I'm not saying you don't love yourself. I'm saying love yourself with God. Right? See God in you. Right? Your eyes are God. Right? Your face is God. Your very image that you see every single day and you live with is God. And so how do you discern that in terms of your love for the Lord? That's probably a long answer, but anybody else have any questions in terms of discernment? Yes.
Then how do you have like or I would say, what's the difference really between like respecting yourself in the sense that, say, someone is harming you in a sort of way and you sort of want to set boundaries down. Like, how do you know then what's the difference between respecting yourself and loving yourself to respect yourself versus like being prideful or having like an ego?
If they degrade your dignity as a human person, as a child of God, you already know, right? Let's take discernment. Remember, discernment is choosing two goods, right? If that person challenged you in a way where you're like, man, even though I don't agree with this person, but there's something there perhaps he's calling or she's calling me to take a look at, right? Maybe that person says, hey, I don't like the way you hurt me the other day. And all of a sudden you felt hurt, right? Because your pride was hurt. And in a certain sense, you say, I didn't intend to hurt you. Right? And all of a sudden you had this dialogue with yourself, like, maybe I should be more careful with my words. But then if somebody come up to you and said, you're the most worst person, you're not, whatever, all the cuss words or whatever it is, right? And I would say, you don't need to discern. In that moment, you already know this person isn't good for you. Right? Or if that person abused you emotionally, psychologically, there's a lot of that happening within the college sphere, for sure. There's psychological games happening within relationships as we speak, right? They're not good for you. Because discernment is two goods, right? They're bad, they're not good for you, right? You don't need to discern that. But if you also say to yourself, maybe this person had a hard life, right? Maybe God is calling me to be compassionate, even in the midst of my persecution, right? Depending on what persecution it is. Because, for example, I was bullied when I was in high school for 5-6 years for sure. Most of my middle school life and part of my high school life. And there was this guy named Renee who bullied me for 6 months over and over. Spit on me, talk about my mom, right? Curse me. I didn't do anything. Because there was something within me that said, just wait. Just wait. Pray for him. And I did. After 6 months, after all of that persecution, he became one of my friends. It's crazy, right? After 6 months, he said to me, hi, hello, good morning. And he shared to me about his family and how he lived in a broken family. Right? And he didn't like the way that I was always smiling. Because I am a very joyful person. Right? But I detached, right? All of that helped me to detach from my own pride. Because truth be told, I could walk right now, and if I didn't see my car, somebody stole it, I wouldn't care. Right? I would not care one day. Because I would say to myself, Interesting, somebody took my car, right? How did they do that? That's interesting. Right, then just call my insurance, right? Say somebody took my car, call the police, and then it's resolved. Whatever happens, happens. Right? It's because I've practiced on that detachment. Right? It's not about me in that moment. It's about how do I love God? No one can take away God from me. Right? That's my prized possession. I do not allow anybody to take away my greatest gift. No one can steal it from me, right? Not unless I give them the power, right? And when I say give them power, not unless I allow somebody to make me angry. Not unless I allow somebody to abuse me to a point where I see myself as lesser than the child of God. Right? Not unless I allow somebody to hurt me in a way where I can't function in my day-to-day life anymore. I'm not going to allow that, because I've already discerned my greatest gift and my greatest fortitude, my greatest strength come from God. And at the end of the day, I could walk in this life with nothing and still smile. And that's the truth. But it took me many, many experiences that was out of my control. Right? My car being slammed by a college student at the University of Redlands. Right? The first time I got in a car crash, I was like, oh my gosh, this sucks. Right? And I felt a little frustrated because I had to get to places. But then I realized, like, hey, at least this guy was safe. And when I walked out of the car, I had my clerics on. He was like, sorry, Father, it was my fault. It was my fault. I did it. I was like, don't worry, are you okay? Right? So it's really, how do we detach, really? And so that's a fine line, really. How do you see and evaluate and discern whether or not this person is good for you? Or are you still in that relationship because maybe you still want that affirmation? Remember the attachment needs I talked about? Maybe the core is I wanted to feel love. Right? And I found this person because this person fulfilled that love in one moment. But after that, I never received it anymore. And I long for that love again. You see? So there is a sense of, why are we doing what we do? Many times it's because we want the needs within ourselves to be fulfilled. And the only way we can let go is if we look at God and say, God, truthfully, you're the only one who can fulfill it. But I'm displacing all of this to people and things. So that's my answer, really. And sometimes life is like, it bugs you, man. It's like get out of here, right?
Discerning God's will.
Is huge. Oh God, no. Sorry. I'm so sorry. It's huge. It was like flying towards me, and I'm like, oh God, no. God, no.
I know, that's like sin sometimes, right? Just like, get away from me.
It's just like, oof.
It's pestering you. Sometimes it's
I'm
huge.
like, wait, no. I'm wondering if it has to do with my hair, because I took a shower and I have hair products on, so I'm like, oh no.
God invites you to let go.
It just...
I know, because when I was in Guadalajara for 3 months, I had mosquitoes in my room that bit me every single day. And there was a point, and I had a bed, I call it the Padre Pio bed. Right? Think about, I'm 6'4". My bed was like one of those twin-size child bed. And the mattress was not a mattress, it was a 3-inch memory foam on wood. And I lay there every night thinking to myself, God, what? Oh my gosh, should I request a queen-size bed? But then I thought to myself, no, you're calling me to detach, right? Because it's the comfort that many times will cause us a lot of frustration, a lot of like edginess. And so when something doesn't go the way that we want it to go, we're going to respond with much frustration. And that's the more you practice that mortification, the more you will see. I'm telling you, the freedom that you want is through that detachment. But you need to embrace those crosses, right? And those crosses are hard sometimes. And they can be very small crosses. It can be like, just the other day I had a slow car on my lane. My lane. I don't even own the lane. I don't even own the lane. On the lane, right? And I was like, man, I still am very impatient, right? And so I realized, like, I'm just gonna cruise behind this car. And whenever I get there, right? So I just put on cruise control. And I listened to my Christian music, right? And I was just jamming into the Lord. And I realized, like, yeah, this is awesome. Right? So the more you're able to do that, you'll be more comfortable in those difficult situations. What was your question again? I'm sorry, I was fired. The bugs got me. That's ADD.
I think you answered most of it, but
Okay.
like discerning God's will, like in the midst of obstacles,
Yeah.
that you have dreams, your goals, and sometimes in life there's a lot of obstacles, and you can't see where you're going sometimes, because you love God and you want to glorify Him in all you do, but we're only human and we can't see what's going to happen in a few years. How am I going to make a living while also glorifying God in all that I do? Because sometimes when you do that, you have to make sacrifices, right? He wants to put you in places that you never expected. So how do you balance that? Settling and desire.
I would say start with God's desire first. Because sometimes we start with the means first rather than the end. For example, you're like, I want to make money in order to have a family, in order to have a car, it has a nice future, right? And then I'll love God, right? And then I'll do charity work. And then I'll have enough money to give to the poor. The end needs to come first. Your purpose needs to come first. I love God, right? I want to serve Him. And by my love for the Lord, I'm going to do my best to have an education, to have a good job. Right? But if that doesn't happen, that's okay because I love God. Right? And so you really have to switch the way you see your life. And same thing with vocation, right? Sometimes you say, oh, I want to go to school, I want to be a lawyer, a doctor, or engineer, whatever your profession is. Right? Then I'll decide about my vocation, whether God's calling me to marriage or to priesthood. But essentially, the goal is first, the call to holiness should be primary. How is God calling you to be a holy person? Then you should be thinking about your vocation. Because what happens, you spend 10 years of your life studying, and all of a sudden God said, I want you to go to the missionary field. And all of a sudden, you go to the mission life, and you're like, oh, I wasn't meant to be a doctor, right? Right? Or I wasn't meant to do this. And they're all looking at you for some apparent reason. and so that's the ideal way. That's the ideal way to look at it, to discern first, right? To discern vocation, and then your occupation or your education. But if it does happen that you discern your education before you discern your vocation, it's not to say your life is ruined. But it's just to say that maybe perhaps in the future, you could have spent more time focusing on this vocation, but you didn't have that ability because you were focusing on your education prior to it. So time wasn't wasted, but it could have been used more better, right? More effectively in terms of God's time. Right? So it comes back to, how do you focus everything on serving God and loving God? Right? Just like eating. Why do you eat?
To live.
To live, but why do you want to live?
To live for God.
To serve God,
To serve God.
right? So food has a place. Food is not an end in itself. Sometimes we treat it like an end. We go, oh my gosh, I'm stressed, I'm gonna eat good food. Krispy Kreme. Right? It makes you feel good. Right? I say that because I'm guilty. I'm guilty, man. Right? But when you eat food, it should give you enough energy to do what? To love. To love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. The two great commandments. Right? But when we treat food as the end, what happens? We become gluttonous. We become tired. Right? We become lazy. And the reason why is because we ate too much. And remember, when you eat too much food, what happens? All your energy is used in order to digest your food. So the energy that would have been used in order to think and operate to love You don't have it because it was wasted towards loving food and not loving God in the correct context. So you see, everything has that direction of how do I love God? So when you go to In-N-Out, say, okay, Lord, how do I love you in this moment? I'm going to order one, right? One double animal style. And maybe not have that fries animal style, right? And maybe not have the second double because you're stressed. I say that because I did it, right? And sometimes I will do it again. Right? I don't know when, but I'm just saying that my human weakness. But that's how you direct and discern things. It's like, if you start with God's love, everything else will be answered for you. Right? Just like when you talk with your mom or your dad. My mom still triggers frustration in me. Right? I go home and her voice, sometimes when she speaks to me, I'm just like, I just want to talk back, you know? Just like, but I know my place. Right? I honor my mother and father, I love them. And I know that they want me to listen. Even when I feel like they're old style. Right? They're the older generation. But it's not about that. It's because in that moment, they wanted me to love them because perhaps they weren't experiencing love in other ways and they miss me. And for me to realize that, to discern that, I will say, okay, how do I love you, God? And God will say to me, listen, just listen. And I will sit there for at least 2 hours sometimes. Right? And I will just listen. Right? And not gripe about it. When those ideas come in your mind, the negative thoughts, cast them out. Pray a Hail Mary. Pray a Our Father. But when you start ruminating those ideas that trigger frustration, you're screwed. Right? Because you already opened the door for Satan and the negative thoughts to enter. So don't open the door. Just say, I have this frustration. It's because why? My pride is still being mortified. What is the matter of me listening? It just takes love. But it's because I want to do or spend my time the way I want to spend my time when I'm home with my parents. Right? See, the I comes back to the I. Right? I want to just sit in my room and relax because I'm tired. I. And God was saying how selfish you are. Right? Your mom needed your love. And your dad needed your love, or your brother and sister needed your love, but you weren't there. What you didn't do to them, you did not do to me. Matthew 25, same thing. When they were naked, you weren't there. When they were thirsty for your love, you weren't there. When they were hungry for your ears, you didn't want to listen. It goes back to everything to how much we love God. Right? And if you can say, I love God a lot, then you will know what to do in your life. It's that easy, but very difficult. Because what you're fighting with is your human self. So the more you know yourself and work on your human psyche, your emotional balance, the more you'll be better to be able to cope with those moments. Right? Because you do love. I know that for sure. You do care. You are sensitive. But it's because all the other things within your mind that's preventing you from doing it. Because your heart, when God created your heart, your soul, it was meant to love. It cannot unlove. The reason why you don't love is because your mind. Your mind is the one that thinks about hatred or prejudice or racism, right? All the negative thoughts. But the heart loves, right? Because when you see somebody suffering, you don't think, why is this person suffering? Oh, you're overthinking all this, and should I serve this person? Should I go over there? And all of a sudden what happens? You don't go over there to help this person. But if you go with your heart in that moment, what happens? You would have bought this person food, or you would come over and say, hey, how you doing? Right? Because you love. Right? You love. You had a question over there?
Yeah, I had two, but I guess first, how do you decipher giving love or loving from foolishness? I think you kind of answered it, but maybe.
Sometime when you love, we will experience foolishness, right? Because sometimes even Jesus Christ says, my thoughts are above your thoughts, my ways are above your ways. Right? His love seems like foolish to the world, but in the eyes of God, they are truly loving. Because why would you love your enemy in society? That's foolish, right? Why would you love somebody that perhaps hurt your siblings? Why would you love somebody that killed maybe your loved one. And that happens. It's foolish. But in the eyes of God, that love is redemptive. Right? That love is saving you from something that perhaps wouldn't be able to save you if you didn't have God's love. Right? Because then what happens? You become frustrated. You didn't have God's love, you'd be frustrated, be angry. So much so that you want vengeance. So much so that you want to kill that person. Right? And sometimes, maybe you don't want to kill that person because you say, I'm too weak, I just want to kill myself. And that happens. And so how do you see that love of God as a radical, transformative love to the point where you don't judge your love, but rather you love because God loves you? So don't prejudge your love. Don't say, if I love this way, will this person love me back? If I send this text, will this person think I'm weird? Send it. Love. Why are you overthinking? And if that person goes, man, you're weird for a second. We just barely met a second ago. Right? Maybe you're weird. Yeah, you got to work on that. Right? Right? I'm just going to say the truth. Maybe you're weird, you got to work on that. Right?
Being weird isn't a bad thing. Well, I guess it can be.
It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It is bad. It starts becoming bad when you're intruding on somebody else's boundaries, or you're devaluing their human dignity as a person, right? Because, for example, you're stalking that person, right? And all of a sudden, that person finds out you're stalking them. I'm like, you need to go to jail, right? Because you're scaring people, right? You know, people have boundaries, right? Respect the boundaries. So that's a different type of negative weird. But weird, like, for example, like your jokes aren't funny, right? Like you say jokes, I'm like I'm not laughing, you're not funny, right? But then somebody else just laugh at you. Not at you. With you. Because your jokes are funny to them, right? What I think is weird, maybe perhaps isn't weird to another person, right? Because weirdness is the differences in their personalities, right? Because you're different than me, I'm like, oh, you're weird, right? But if you're like me, I'm like, oh man, you're my best friend, right? So maybe there's that degree of weirdness, but there is also that degree of weirdness where it can be sinful, right? It can be negative. Anybody else any questions?
So there's been like mentioning about when you're feeling like particularly emotional and to try and kind of like let go of that and like let go of the pride. But say like, let's just say like in any like relationship, whether it be like friendships, a partner, or your family, like, and then you suddenly get like very emotional. Is there like a way in order to express that without kind of like shoving it away, but like in a way that's kind of like in a kind and loving manner?
So, for example, if you get frustrated for something they say that you didn't agree with, and all of a sudden there's a sense of like anger, frustration, because you want to say something, but you don't want to hurt their feelings, correct? The best way to do that in that present moment is to recognize what you're feeling, right? And ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? Right? And many times when you ask yourself, why am I feeling this way, it's because I don't agree with this person in front of me. Right? I don't agree with my brother and sister, what they're saying. But because I don't agree with them, I'm getting frustrated, and I need to remain silent. Because the more you remain silent, over time you will see your frustration will lower. Because why? All the triggers, you're not going to respond in anger or frustration, but you're responding with patient love. So you're transforming the way your brain is constructed in that moment. Because back then, the usual normal pattern is, I'm going to say something to your face, right? Because I'm right, you're wrong, right? But that frustration is very hard to overcome. And how we overcome it is just by calming yourself and listening. Even when you're in the edge, even like after they leave, and you're thinking about it, you're like, I should just say something, right? And all of a sudden, you're kind of speaking to your friend about it. I would recommend, don't speak to your friend immediately about it. Allow God to sit with you in that moment. And sleep on it, right? And if you can't sleep, think about something else. Because sometimes when we say it to our friend, what happened is that we are losing out on that mortifying of our passions, right? And we are lessening that degree of carrying that cross. Because sometimes, for example, imagine you're in pain, right? And all of a sudden you say to her, I'm in pain, everybody, please console me, right? We lose that sense of sacrifice, right? We lose a sense of God inviting us to say, you know what? Deal with that in the present moment, because at the end of the day, you're being prideful. You're not wanting to sit with these difficult emotions. Because sometimes we just don't want to feel it. We just want somebody to affirm us or to say, everything be okay, you know. I'm here for you, right? Oh, what that person said was totally wrong. And all of a sudden we feel like, okay, somebody understands me. So I would say don't diffuse it at that moment, but allow God to sit with you and to see what you are struggling with. Why are you angry? Right? Why do you feel that way? Why is this person in front of you like irritating you when he or she isn't saying anything? Right? It's because there's a part of you that you're not used to confronting and you don't like. Right? So that's why sometimes we don't like people who are opposite to us. It's because we're not used to it. Right? We like similar personality, similar traits. Right? But the more you put yourself in front of people who are challenging to you, the more you're able to see, yeah, there's something in me that I still need to work on. Right? And so I would say, yeah, try to sit with it and then talk to your friend maybe the next day and see where that goes. But sometimes I think it's like also talking wrongly of the person to our friends too. Right? So it's in a certain sense like gossip too, right? Because we fall into that. Because we're angry and all of a sudden, you know, we talk wrongly of that person to our friends. And that's not a way to heal either. Right? Because that's causing sin too. So you're absorbing their sin. Right? That person that caused you frustration perhaps, right? Because of whatever reason, they didn't have the ability to understand that what they said affected you in that manner, that way. Right? And so sometimes people won't have that sensitivity level. Because before I talk to somebody, I have the sensitivity level to say, okay, is this person ready to hear what I say? Maybe this person coming from work and I know that he or she is tired. I'm not going to lay the bomb on this person, right? I'm going to say, okay, maybe tomorrow. And if not tomorrow, maybe a week from now. Right? I'm just going to let it go and see where God's inviting me to do in this present moment. So that's how you kind of deal and balance with your own emotions. Because it's not about pointing the fingers, remember. It's about how can you wrestle with your own emotions and balance it, which is very important. So emotional work, very important. Many of us has very immature emotions. Right? And the reason why I say that is because I meet a lot of people, and teenagers, young adults, and I know that their emotions, they do not know how to control them. They're always angry. Anger is probably the number one emotions that people feel and don't understand. And I ask them, why are you angry? Right? And all of a sudden, as we go deeper, I understand, oh my goodness, you're angry because you're feeling lonely. You're angry because you're selfish. You're angry because somebody did something wrong to you, right? And you can't forgive, and you can't move forward. So there's many, many reasons why. But keep working at it, keep sharing. Sharing emotions is very important too, right? To a priest or counselor, or somebody who is an authority figure. Because that's how we go deeper into your human psyche and emotional life. Because if not, you bottle it up, and what happens? You really don't know what's happening within you. You're like, oh my gosh, why did I wake up bitter? Why did I wake up resentful? It's because you're being overwhelmed by your emotions. And school, trust me, school, all the work that you do at school, it will cause an influx of different emotions. Because sometimes when you're studying or you're stressed, and then your mom says something, and you're thinking about your mom, thinking about your studying, thinking about work, thinking about all this, and all of a sudden, you explode, right? And what happens within your emotional life is you become very, very bitter. You become very impatient. It's not because you are, it's because you're not dealing with anger. And remember, anger is a secondary emotion, so you're not dealing with the primary emotions. You're feeling lonely, right? Maybe you're stuck in your room 2 weeks studying for the finals. And all of a sudden you're like, why am I feeling this way? Because you're in your room 2 weeks, right? Call somebody, go get ice cream, you know, go somewhere for an hour, right? Do something. And that's, stretch yourself, really. I used to be very shy, very, very shy, because I hated my emotions. Right? I wasn't shy because I wanted to. It's I hated my emotions. I hated to feel that way. But now, I'm not shy anymore. Right? I'm scared, so I'm nervous because there's a part of my pride that gets in the way still. And I'm still working at just diminishing that pride. But like I said, it's okay. At the end of the night, if I cry because my pride is hurt, thanks be to God. But if I cry because I feel guilty, that's another story, man. right? That's something that I really got to work at. Any other questions, comments? I know we talked a lot. Discernment is so hard. It's so difficult because you have to discern your emotions, your thoughts, your feelings. And because all of that, you have to discern, okay, what is God's will for you? And God's will is very easy, love. Love God first and foremost, and everything else will be solved. And your life should not be evaluated as success or failure. Don't evaluate like that. Just because you didn't pass a test or not doesn't mean your life is ruined. Just because you didn't get this school or that school or this job or that job, it doesn't mean your life is ruined, right? If you continue to love, I'm telling you, it's enough. That is the fulfillment. If you're able to love the way that you're called to love. Take out all the roadblocks of loving, right? Because you're probably, I think you sometimes, because I know from my experience, sometimes we're placing a lot of roadblocks in order to express the way we want to love. And the hardest is loving your family member in the way that you want to love them. Like the first time I said to my brother, I love you, it was the weirdest moment. Right? It was in college. And I was like, I love you, man. And all of a sudden, the wall broke. It's just like, I love you too. And I was like, dang, this is deep. Like, why didn't we do this like years ago, right? It's strange, man. This is so strange. Our pride gets in the way sometimes. And what I'm telling you is this is how you grow into be a very mature, holy adult. Right? Do not be afraid of expressing your emotions, your thoughts, and your feelings. And sometimes you will feel foolish. Sometimes you will feel like, I lost something, but that's okay. Because love requires that sacrifice. And don't be afraid to lose. Right? To lose yourself for God. That is probably one of my most valuable lesson was when I was able to say, you know what, who cares? I don't care if I express my emotions and love to my family, right? Because I was always hiding it. Because I always felt like if I loved them, I'd lose. It was a weird concept in my mind. It's like if I express love to my dad, I feel like I lost something. And then the moment I say, whatever, right, I lose. But then when I look at Jesus Christ, I was like, he lost his life. Right? So in a certain sense, there was a loss, but he was victorious. So when we lose ourselves and we say, you know what, this is who I am, we win. Right? We win. I'm telling you, it's crazy how that will conquer all of your fears. So that's my encouragement. That's my talk. Thank you for listening to me this evening. Don't want to keep you any longer.